At my own retirement dinner, after 35 years of service, I heard my son-in-law tell a stranger, "He's not family, he's a paycheck." What he didn't know was that three of the most powerful men in the city were sitting at the next table. My name is Captain Michael Reeves. That celebration was for 35 years with the city fire department. In one sentence, my son-in-law tried to erase a lifetime, and in the silence that followed, I realized the room had already chosen a side. This is the story of what happens when a private insult becomes a public verdict, and how the people you save can sometimes return the favor. I joined the fire department in 1989. Back then, you didn't do it for the money. You did it because the bell rang and you ran toward the thing everyone else was running from. For 35 years, that was my life. The smell of smoke and sweat, the sound of the alarm at 3 a.m., the weight of the gear. I raised my family on that schedule. My wife, Elena, learned to sleep through the night shifts. My daughter, Chloe, drew pictures of me in my helmet for school. It was a good life, a purposeful one, but it leaves marks. You see things you can't unsee, you carry losses that don't have names, and you learn very quickly who you can trust in a burning building. That lesson, it turns out, applies just as well to a family dinner. My daughter Chloe is 31. She's smart, kind-hearted, maybe too kind-hearted for her own good. She married Jason 4 years ago. The wedding was at a vineyard upstate. I remember standing there, giving my speech, looking at Jason in his tuxedo. He was handsome, charismatic, worked in commercial real estate. He shook my hand firmly and called me captain. I thought he was ambitious. What I didn't see, what I chose not to see because Chloe was so happy, was that his ambition had a cold edge to it. Jason came from a different world. His father was a corporate lawyer. His mother was on the board of 2 museums. They talked about portfolios and market leverage over cocktails. In their world, relationships were often assessed by utility. I missed that signal. I was just glad my daughter had found someone who could provide her with a stable, comfortable life. First real crack appeared about 2 years into the marriage. It was a Sunday barbecue at my house. Jason was talking about a big development deal that had fallen through. He was frustrated, packing near the grill. "It's all about who you know," he said, not looking at me. "Connections are the only currency that matters." Then he did look at me. "You know, Mike, you must know half the city by now. The guys you've pulled out of wrecks, the families you've helped after fires. That's a serious network." I shrugged it off. I told him it wasn't like that. "We help people, we don't keep a ledger." He smiled a thin smile and changed the subject. That was the first time I felt like a resource being evaluated, not a father-in-law being talked to. The pressure began the way these things do, with a soft ask. Jason and Chloe were looking to buy a house. The market was brutal. They found a place in a new development, all granite and glass, but the mortgage was steep. One evening, Jason called me. "Captain," he said, always with that title, "I was wondering if you could put in a word with the city housing commissioner. A recommendation from a decorated fire captain might grease the wheels." I told him I didn't operate that way. My word was for my crew, for their character in an emergency, not for real estate favors. There was a long silence on the line. "Right," he said finally. "Of course." The chill in his voice was new. They got the house anyway. Jason's parents covered the down payment. After that, the dynamic shifted. At family gatherings, Jason would make comments about blue-collar pensions and municipal benefits like they were quaint, outdated concepts. He'd ask me in front of everyone when I was going to cash out and enjoy the easy life. He was measuring my retirement, my financial worth, with a clinical detachment. My wife, Elena, started noticing it too. She'd squeeze my hand under the table when he started. "He doesn't understand what you do," she'd whisper, but it was more than that. He didn't want to understand. Understanding would have required respect. Then 6 months ago, Jason's real estate firm hit a major slump. 2 big deals collapsed. Suddenly, the mortgage on that glass house was a mountain. The calls started again, but this time they weren't for favors. They were invitations to invest. He had can't-miss opportunities, partnerships where my retirement savings could work smarter. I always said no. My pension wasn't a venture capital fund. It was the product of 35 years of crawling into dangerous places. It was for me and Elena. Every refusal was met with a sigh, a muttered comment about missed opportunities, a gradual cooling toward me that Chloe felt acutely. She'd tried to bridge the gap, making excuses for his stress. I saw her getting thinner, quieter. The daughter I knew was being sanded down by her husband's frustration. The planning for my retirement dinner began. The department does it for every captain. It was to be at the Foundry, a nice downtown steakhouse. The guest list was a mix of brother firefighters, city officials, and family. I invited Chloe and Jason, of course. When I told Jason the date, he perked up for the first time in months. The Foundry, that's where the mayor's people eat. Who's going to be there? I read him the list. Fire Chief Ed Vargas, Mayor's Chief of Staff David Chen, a few city council members, even Tomás Rivera, a reporter from the Tribune who'd covered the department for years. Jason went quiet. "That's a serious room," he said slowly. I could almost hear the calculations clicking behind his eyes. The night of the dinner arrived. The back room of the Foundry was all dark wood and soft light. My crew from Station 9 was there, laughing, telling embarrassingly loud stories about me. Chief Vargas gave a speech about the old warehouse fire on 7th Street. David Chen presented a commendation from the mayor's office. I saw Jason working the room. He wasn't sitting with Chloe. He was moving from table to table, shaking hands, exchanging cards. He spent 10 minutes talking to Chief Vargas, another 15 with David Chen. He was in his element, a deal-maker in a room full of what he saw as assets. I felt a knot form in my stomach. After the formal speeches, people mingled. I was at my table with Elena, enjoying a moment of quiet. I got up to use the restroom. On my way back, I took a detour through a quieter hallway lined with wine racks. That's when I heard his voice. Jason was around the corner, just out of sight, talking to another guest, a younger guy from a supply company I recognized. Their voices carried in the hushed space. "Yeah, it's a nice party," Jason was saying, his tone loose, conversational. "But let's be real, the old man's finally tapping the well. 35 years of city pension, full benefits, it's a solid paycheck." There was a laugh from the other man, and then Jason said the words that froze me in place. "Honestly, he's not really family, he's just a paycheck. A stubborn one, but that's about to change." The air left my lungs. I stood there, my dress uniform suddenly feeling like a costume. The noise from the party room seemed to fade into a distant hum. I wasn't angry yet. I was just empty. A 35-year career reduced to a direct deposit. A father's love dismissed as a financial obstacle. I took a step back, not wanting to be seen. As I did, I glanced into the main room, and that's when I saw them. At the round table nearest the hallway, their dinners unfinished, sat Chief Vargas, David Chen, and Tomás Rivera, the reporter. All three men were turned slightly, their conversation halted. Their expressions were unreadable, but their attention was fixed on the hallway where Jason's voice had just echoed. They had heard everything. I didn't confront Jason. I walked back to my table, my face a mask. Elena took my hand. "What's wrong?" she asked. I just shook my head. For the rest of the night I watched. I watched Jason, oblivious, laughing with the supply guy. I watched the chief's table. Chief Vargas never looked at Jason again, but he exchanged a long, quiet look with David Chen. Tomás Rivera took out his phone and typed a brief note. The party ended with handshakes and backslaps. Jason came over, clapped me on the shoulder. "Great party, Captain, really impressive crowd." His smile was wide, genuine in its triumph. He had no idea. As we gathered our coats, Chief Vargas approached. He didn't say anything about what he'd heard. He just put a hand on my arm, looked me in the eye and said, "You've always been family to this department, Mike. Remember that." Then he walked away. 3 days later, the silence was broken. It wasn't from Jason. It was a phone call from David Chen, the mayor's chief of staff. His voice was all business. "Captain Reeves, David Chen, the mayor was briefed on your exemplary service record. We were wondering if you'd consider a temporary advisory role on the city's emergency preparedness board. It's a paid position. We need someone with uncompromised integrity." The offer was formal, but the subtext screamed, "We heard. We are choosing a side." I thanked him and said I'd consider it. I hung up the phone and looked at Elena. The wheels were now in motion, and Jason, still dreaming of his next deal, was about to find out that the room always listens, and sometimes the room talks back. I accepted the city's advisory role. 2 days later, Jason called. His voice was different, strained, a note of panic bleeding through the usual confidence. "Captain," he said, "we need to talk. Something's happened." He wanted to meet not at my house but at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. When I arrived, he was already there, jittery, nursing a cold espresso. He didn't look at me. "The Silver Ridge deal," he said, staring into his cup. "It's dead." The developers pulled out this morning. They said our firm lacked the necessary community standing. He finally met my eyes. Do you know what that means? I did. Silver Ridge was a massive mixed-use project Jason had been chasing for a year. His firm's survival depended on it. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was, for my daughter's sake. Jason leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. David Chen sits on the city planning committee that just reviewed Silver Ridge's community impact statement. He voted against it. He wrote the memo about questionable community standing. He was waiting for a reaction. I gave him none. Did you say something to him, Mike? Did you tell him not to support my project? I told him the truth. I hadn't spoken to David Chen since he offered me the job. Jason's face went pale. He was putting it together. The retirement dinner, the overheard conversation, the sudden cold shift from the mayor's office. The reality was dawning on him, and it was worse than he imagined. It wasn't active sabotage, it was passive judgment. His own words had poisoned his own well. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. This is unbelievable, he said, and walked out without another word. That evening, my daughter Chloe showed up at my door alone. Her eyes were red. She came inside and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd done her homework as a kid. Dad, she said, her voice trembling. Jason came home furious. He said you're ruining his career. He said you turned the city against him because you're bitter. I didn't defend myself. I simply asked her what she thought. She cried then, a quiet, broken sound. I heard what he said at your dinner, Dad. I was looking for you and I heard him. The confession hung in the air. She had known and said nothing. The hurt in her eyes wasn't just for me or for her marriage, it was for her own silence. Why, was all I could ask. She wiped her eyes. Because every time I try to talk to him about how he treats you, he tells me I don't understand business. He tells me I'm choosing between my husband and my father, and I'm so tired, Dad. The next development came from an unexpected direction. Tomás Rivera, the Tribune reporter, published a feature. It wasn't about Jason. It was a long-form piece titled The Last Alarm, What We Owe Our Lifesavers. It was a profile of my career, but woven through it were pointed quotes about integrity, about how a firehouse measures a person not by their bank account, but by their willingness to carry the load. One line stood out. In some professions, your word is your bond. In others, your bond is measured in words, and the ones spoken when you think no one is listening reveal the true foundation. It was a masterpiece of implication. Everyone in city circles read it. Jason's world was built on perception, and the perception was now that he was the man who insulted a fire captain at his own retirement. The institutional reaction accelerated. Chief Vargas called me into his office. He didn't mince words. The Union Hall wants to have a fundraiser for the Widows and Orphans Fund. They want to name it after you. The vote was unanimous. It was a huge honor, one that came with a very public platform. I agreed. The fundraiser was set for 2 months out. The chief then slid a folder across his desk. I also did some digging. Jason's firm, Crestline Partners, has submitted bids on 3 municipal contracts in the last year. All were rejected for being non-competitive. After the dinner, his firm was quietly removed from the pre-approved vendor list for any future city-related business. He closed the folder. I didn't do that. The procurement office did. Word gets around, Mike. The city protects its own. The pressure on Jason's business became intolerable. Within a month, 2 more junior partners left Crestline. Their client list evaporated. The glass house was suddenly a glass prison. Jason's response was not remorse, it was escalation. He hired a lawyer, not for a business dispute, but for a familial one. I received a formal letter from an attorney named Amanda Shaw. It claimed that I was intentionally interfering with Jason's business relationships and making defamatory statements to city officials. It demanded I cease all harmful activities and issue a public statement of support for Jason's firm or face legal action for tortious interference. I read the letter and felt a cold calm. He was treating a family rupture like a corporate takeover. I gave the letter to my own attorney, a steady man named Phil who had handled my will. Phil laughed once, a short, dry sound. He has no standing, but he's trying to scare you. This is a pressure tactic. I refused to be scared. I refused to engage, but Jason wasn't finished. He went to my daughter. He told Chloe that if she didn't get me to fix this, their marriage was over. He gave her an ultimatum, her father or her husband. Chloe, broken and desperate, came to me with his demand. She stood in my living room, a shell of the vibrant woman she'd been. Dad, please just say something to David Chen. Just one word. We can save our home. We can save us. It was the hardest moment of my life, harder than any fire. To see my child used as a weapon against me, I took her hands. Chloe, if I do that, I am telling every person in that room that what he said was acceptable. I am telling them that my 35 years of service is for sale for your husband's convenience. I can't do that, and you shouldn't ask me to. She pulled her hands away, her face collapsing. So that's it. You choose your pride over my life. She left, and the chasm between us felt infinite. A week later, the major pivot came. It arrived in a plain manila envelope, no return address, delivered to my mailbox. Inside were photocopied bank statements, loan applications, and internal emails from Crestline Partners. They were messy, complicated, but one pattern was clear. Jason had been commingling client escrow funds with operating capital. It was a desperate, likely illegal, attempt to keep the firm afloat as deals fell apart. The last document was a screenshot of a text exchange between Jason and an unnamed contact. Jason had written, "Need the Silver Ridge deal to close, using client deposits to cover payroll. If this falls through, it's over." The contact replied, "You're playing with fire." Jason's response was, "The old man is the one who lit the match." I didn't know who sent it. Tomás Rivera, a disgruntled former partner. I didn't care. The information changed everything. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or social status anymore. This was about fraud. This was about people's money. I took the envelope straight to Phil, my attorney. He reviewed the documents, his expression grim. "This is serious, Mike. If this is real, he's in deep trouble. This isn't a family spat. This is a white-collar crime in progress." Phil advised me to take it to the authorities, but doing that would not just ruin Jason, it would destroy my daughter. I was trapped. I told Phil to hold onto the documents. I needed to think. I decided to confront Jason directly one last time, man to man. I called him and told him I had the envelope. I told him to meet me at the firehouse, my old station, after hours. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. He arrived looking gaunt, haunted. The confidence was gone, replaced by a raw animal fear. I showed him the copies, his face drained of all color. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. I told him it didn't matter. "What matters is what I do with it," I said. "You have a choice, Jason. You walk away from this, you dissolve your firm, you come clean to your clients, every single one. You get a real job and you start treating my daughter and my family with respect, or I take this to the district attorney's office tomorrow." He stared at the documents, his hands shaking. "You'd ruin me," he said. "You'd ruin Chloe." I leaned in, my voice low. "You're doing that all by yourself. I'm giving you a chance to stop the collapse before someone gets buried in it." He didn't answer. He just turned and walked out into the night. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from Station 9. There had been a break-in, not at my home, but at the firehouse. My old locker had been pried open. Nothing was taken, but something was left. A single, folded piece of paper was placed inside. It was a printout of a Google Maps image. My house was circled in red. Underneath, in typed letters, it read, "You started a fire you can't put out, watch it burn." It wasn't signed, it didn't need to be. The threat was clear, and it had crossed a line from financial pressure to something darker, more personal. I called Chief Vargas immediately. He came to the station, saw the note, and his face went hard as stone. "This is my house now," he said. "This is department business." He called the police, and then he called David Chen. The room wasn't just talking back anymore. It was mobilizing. And Jason was about to learn that when you threaten a fireman, you threaten the whole brotherhood. The police report was filed as a suspected intimidation of a public servant. That's a felony. But the real response didn't come from the precinct. It came from the Firehouse Union. They held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited. The next morning, I got a call from Lou Henderson, the union president. His voice was gravel and resolve. "Mike, we've been made aware of the situation. The Brotherhood has your 6. We're initiating a voluntary patrol schedule. Off-duty guys will drive by your house in shifts, day and night. No one will approach, they'll just be present." I tried to refuse. I told him it was too much. Lou cut me off. "You spent 35 years watching our backs. You pulled 3 of our guys out of a collapse on 12th Street. This is what we do, we watch the watchmen." By that evening, the first car, a pickup truck with a faded union sticker, parked down the street. It was a silent, rolling barricade of solidarity. Jason would have to see it every time he looked at my house. The city's reaction was more formal and more devastating. David Chen called me into a meeting at City Hall. He sat across from me, his expression unreadable. Captain Reeves, the mayor has been briefed. We take threats against city employees, especially retired first responders, extremely seriously. As of this morning, the city has suspended all pending reviews of any project, permit, or license application associated with Crestline Partners or Jason Miller, pending the outcome of the police investigation. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a memo to all department heads. Jason's professional life in this city was now in deep freeze. This is standard procedure, Chen said, but his eyes said otherwise. This was the room enforcing its rules. Jason, now cornered and desperate, made his worst move yet. He didn't come after me. He went after my daughter. He emptied their joint bank accounts. Over $60,000, their entire savings gone. He transferred it to an account under his mother's name. Then he served Chloe with divorce papers. The filing was brutal. It alleged irreconcilable differences and undue influence by a third party, meaning me. It demanded sole possession of the house and portrayed Chloe as mentally unstable, manipulated by her father. He was trying to cut his losses and run, and he was using my daughter as both a shield and a bargaining chip. Chloe showed up at my door with the papers, sobbing, clutching a suitcase. She had nowhere else to go. The glass house was empty, the locks changed. Seeing my daughter broken, financially stripped, and legally attacked flipped a switch in me. This was no longer about my pride or my pension. This was about protecting my child. I called Phil, my attorney, and I gave him the green light. Use the envelope, I said. Take it to the district attorney. Now. Phil didn't hesitate. He made the call. Within 48 hours, the white-collar crime unit opened an investigation into Crestline Partners for misappropriation of client funds. Jason was now staring down the barrel of criminal charges, not just social exile. But here's the thing about cornered animals: they don't think, they react. Jason's reaction was to go public. He gave an interview to a small business podcast. He didn't name me, but he told a story of a local patriarch using City Hall connections to destroy a small business out of spite and jealousy. He played the victim beautifully. The podcast host ate it up. A few local blogs picked up the story. The narrative was shifting from a greedy son-in-law to a tale of a powerful old guard crushing a young entrepreneur. Tomás Rivera at the Tribune caught wind of it. He called me. Mike, he's building a narrative. It's slanted, but it's compelling. I need your side now, or he's going to control the story. I agreed to talk on the record. The interview with Rivera was the hardest conversation of my life. I had to lay it all out. The retirement dinner comment, the financial pressure, the threat in my locker, the drained bank accounts, the divorce papers. I showed him copies of everything except the evidence of the fraud, which was now with the DA. Rivera listened, took notes, and asked one pivotal question. Why now? Why let it get this far? My answer was simple. Because I kept hoping he'd remember he was part of my family. But he only ever saw a transaction. Rivera's article came out 2 days later. It was titled The Ledger: When Family is Measured in Dollars and Duty. It was a masterclass in balanced, devastating journalism. It presented both sides, but the facts were the facts. It included the full quote from the retirement dinner. It detailed the city's withdrawal of business. It mentioned the police report. And it ended with a quote from me. I spent my career running into burning buildings to save people. I never thought I'd have to save my daughter from the man who promised to love her. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The podcast narrative collapsed. The Brotherhood, the city, and now the court of public opinion had all reached a verdict. Wait, it gets worse moment came the next week. It wasn't about Jason. It was about Chloe. She had been seeing a therapist trying to cope. During a session, she broke down and confessed something she had been hiding for months. Jason had taken out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago without her knowledge. He had forged her signature. The loan was for $250,000. It was due in full in 90 days. He had used the money to try and shore up Crestline. He had not only bankrupted them, he had committed felony fraud in her name. My daughter wasn't just broke. She was legally liable for $250,000 she never agreed to borrow. The foundation of her life wasn't just cracked, it was built on forgery. I went to Phil with this new horror. He was grim. We can fight this, but it's a long process. The bank will come after her. Her credit is already destroyed. There was only one way to protect her completely, and it was a nuclear option. Phil drafted a letter to Jason's attorney with copies to the DA and the bank's fraud department. It stated that if Jason did not immediately sign a notarized confession to the loan forgery, assume full liability for the debt, and drop all claims in the divorce, we would press for the maximum criminal penalties on the misappropriation case and make the entire sordid story part of the public court record. It was an ultimatum wrapped in a threat. We gave him 48 hours. Jason's response was silence. For 47 hours, nothing. Then, on the final afternoon, his attorney called Phil. Jason would agree to all terms on one condition. He wanted a meeting with me. Alone, Phil advised against it. Chief Vargas told me not to go, but I had to look him in the eye one last time. I agreed. We met at a public park at a picnic table in the middle of an open field. He looked hollowed out, aged 10 years in 10 weeks. He didn't speak at first. He just slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. It was the signed confession for the forged loan. "I'm sorry," he said, the words barely audible. It wasn't an apology for what he'd done to me. It was the surrender of a defeated man. Looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a profound emptiness. "The condition for the meeting," I said. "What is it?" He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I need you to know something. When I said you were just a paycheck, that wasn't the first time I thought it. It was the first time I said it out loud. But I thought it the day I married Chloe. I looked at you in your uniform and I thought, that's a solid foundation. That's a good safety net. I never saw a father. I saw an asset. And I am so sorry for what that cost her." He stood up and walked away without another word. I sat there for a long time, watching the sunset. The war was over. Now came the harder part, clearing the rubble and seeing what, if anything, could be rebuilt from the wreckage. I drove home from that park as the streetlights flickered on. The silence in my truck was different. It wasn't the tense quiet of waiting for the next attack. It was the hollow, echoing quiet after the storm has passed, when you walk outside to survey the damage. Elena was waiting for me. She didn't ask how it went. She just put her arms around me. For the first time in months, I took a full breath. The legal machinery, once engaged, moved with a cold, efficient finality. Jason signed the full confession for the forged loan. The divorce proceeded under the terms we demanded. Chloe got the house, free and clear, with Jason assuming all liability for the second mortgage and their other debts. He didn't fight it. His attorney communicated that Jason would be relocating to another state to live with his parents. He was broken, but more importantly, he was gone. The district attorney's investigation into the misappropriated client funds culminated in a plea deal. Jason avoided jail time by agreeing to full restitution and accepting a felony conviction for wire fraud. He would be on probation for 5 years. His career in real estate in any city was finished. I felt no satisfaction reading the news report, just a deep, weary acknowledgement that the ledger had been settled and the cost had been astronomical for everyone. The house, Chloe's house, became a hospital for the heart. She moved back in, but it was just a shell filled with bad memories. One Saturday, I showed up with a crew, not from the fire department, but from the union. 6 guys in jeans and work boots. We didn't ask, we just started. We packed every remnant of Jason into boxes. We repainted the living room, a warm color Chloe picked out. We hauled the 2 modern furniture he'd chosen to a consignment shop. We worked in quiet companionship, the way we would after a rough call, cleaning up so life could start again. By the end of the weekend, the place felt lighter. Chloe cried when she saw it, but they were the first tears that didn't seem to break her. My city advisory role began in earnest. It wasn't a sympathy post. They put me to work reviewing emergency evacuation plans for new high-rises. My first meeting was with David Chen and Chief Vargas. Before we started, Vargas slid a folded newspaper across the table to me. It was the business section. A brief article noted that Crestline Partners had filed for dissolution. Vargas just nodded. David Chen looked at me and said, "The room is quiet now, Captain." That was all. We got to work. The union fundraiser, named the Reeves Legacy Benefit, was held on a bright Saturday in May. I thought it would be a small hall, a few old-timers. I was wrong. They booked the convention center. Firefighters came from 3 counties. City officials showed up. Families we'd helped over the decades were there. It was a sea of people, a physical manifestation of the brotherhood I'd talked about. I had to give a speech. I stood at the podium, looking out at 1,000 faces. I talked about service. I talked about trust. And then I said, "A few months ago, someone tried to tell me I was just a paycheck. Looking at you all here tonight, I finally understand what I really am. I'm a link in a chain, and this chain doesn't break. The roar that filled that room was a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. After the speeches, as I was shaking hands, an older woman approached me. She had kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Captain Reeves," she said, "my name is Gloria Miller, Jason's mother." My body went rigid. She must have seen it. "I'm not here to make excuses," she said quickly. "I'm here to apologize for my son and for myself. We raised him to see the world as a spreadsheet. We taught him that value was a number. We were wrong. And we are so profoundly sorry for the pain he caused your family." She pressed an envelope into my hand. "This is for Chloe. It's not much, but it's something." She turned and walked away before I could respond. I opened the envelope later. It was a cashier's check for $25,000 and a short note that said, "For a new beginning." The surprise wasn't the money. It was the acknowledgement from the source that their entire worldview had been flawed. Chloe started therapy in earnest. She went back to school online, studying graphic design, something she'd always loved, but Jason had called impractical. She began to smile again, the real smile that reached her eyes. One evening she came over for dinner. Over dessert she said, "I want to sell the house, Dad." I asked her why. She looked around my kitchen at the comfortable, lived-in chaos. "Because it was never a home. It was a statement. I want to find a place that feels like this. Messy and real and mine." So we put it on the market. It sold in a week. With the proceeds, Chloe bought a small, bright condominium near the river. She asked me to help her move. It was just the two of us, carrying boxes up the stairs. When we were done, we sat on the floor of her empty living room, drinking water from bottles. She looked at me and said, "Thank you for not giving in, Dad. Thank you for showing me what a boundary looks like. I think I lost myself because I didn't know how to build one." It was the moment I knew she would be okay. More than okay, she would be stronger. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a Sunday morning. I was reading the paper when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "Captain Reeves, this is Tomás Rivera. I have a source at the DA's office. The initial tip about the misappropriated funds, the one in the envelope you received, it didn't come from a disgruntled partner. It came from David Chen's office. The city auditor had flagged irregular transfers from Crestline months before your retirement dinner. They were already building a case. Your son-in-law was under investigation before he ever said a word at the foundry. What he said that night just told them what kind of man they were dealing with. Thought you should know." I read the text 3 times. The city already knew. Jason was already falling. His insult at my dinner hadn't started his downfall. It had simply revealed his character to the people who were already holding the leash. The room hadn't just listened. It had already been watching. The profound justice of that left me stunned. His cruelty wasn't the cause of his collapse, it was the symptom. And the system, for all its flaws, had recognized a toxic element and removed it. I never told Chloe. Some truths are anchors, not sails. So here we are, the fire is out, the smoke has cleared. Chloe is building a life on her own terms in her bright apartment by the river. I still have my mornings with Alina, my coffee, the view of our backyard. The Union Patrol stopped months ago, but every now and then I'll see a truck with a familiar sticker driving slowly down my street, a silent nod from a brother. My work with the city continues. It feels good to use the knowledge to build something that might keep people safe. People ask me if I won. I tell them it wasn't a game, so there was no winning. There was only surviving with your integrity intact and helping someone you love do the same. A foundation isn't about being unyielding stone. It's about knowing what weight it can bear and what weight it must refuse. I bore the weight of my duty for 35 years. I refused the weight of my son-in-law's disrespect. And in the end, that refusal held up everything that mattered. The paycheck comment was meant to diminish me. Instead, it became the receipt for a debt he could never afford to pay. So what do you take from a story like this? It's not about revenge, though it might feel that way at first. It's about calibration. For 35 years, I calibrated instruments to measure heat, to detect smoke, to know when a structure was about to fail. This whole ordeal was just another form of calibration. It measured the distance between what someone said in the light and what they did in the dark. It measured the strength of my own foundations, not just as a fireman, but as a man, a father, a husband. That comment, "he's just a paycheck," was meant to be a dismissal. Instead, it became a diagnosis. It diagnosed a sickness in him, a transactional view of human connection that eventually consumed everything it touched. and it diagnosed the health in the community around me, the brotherhood that showed up without being asked, the city that enforced its own code of honor, the silent witnesses who knew that some lines, once crossed, changed the map forever. We talk a lot about family, blood family, chosen family, work family, but real family isn't a label you claim for convenience. It's a bond you honor through action, especially when it's difficult. It's showing up at 2 in the morning when the alarm rings. It's holding a line even when people are shouting at you from both sides. It's looking at someone who has hurt you and still seeing the person they could be while refusing to tolerate the person they are. I learned that in the firehouse. I had to relearn it in my own home. My story isn't unique. The research tells us that 1 out of every 4 fathers experiences estrangement. Spouses become gatekeepers. Words spoken in moments of carelessness or cruelty can fracture bonds that took decades to build. We're all just one overheard conversation, one moment of taken for granted disrespect, away from finding out who our real family is. The question isn't if you'll be tested. The question is what you've built that will hold when the test comes. I built bridges for a living, in a manner of speaking. I built bridges between danger and safety, between chaos and order, between people and the ground falling out beneath them. The most important bridge I ever built was the one back to my daughter. It wasn't made of steel or concrete. It was made of difficult truths, unwavering patience, and the kind of love that doesn't keep a ledger. That bridge holds. It holds because we maintain it day after day in the quiet choices we make. So if you take one thing from this, let it be this: pay attention to the room. The room is always listening. The room is your community, your colleagues, the strangers who witness your character when you think no one is looking. And the room remembers. It remembers who ran toward the fire and who only saw the dollar signs in the smoke. Build your life so that when the room hears your story, it doesn't need to take a vote. It already knows which side it's on. Thank you for listening. This has been my story. If you have a story of a line you had to hold, a boundary you had to defend, or a time the room listened for you, I'd like to hear it. Share it below. And if you want more stories that dig into the real foundations of our lives, make sure you're subscribed. Until next time.